I want you to realize that you are in default mode. According to Dan Gilbert of Harvard, who wrote Stumbling into Happiness, 46.9% of the time, that's half of the day, you're in autopilot mode. You've got two modes in the way in which your brain operates: the default mode and the direct mode. The default I call autopilot. That's like when your thoughts drift. It's when you're on autopilot. It's when you go through your day without even thinking. The direct mode is the mode where you're present, where you're in the moment, where you're controlling what you think about. You have a choice. You're either going to repeat what you're doing or you're going to evolve it. There are two modes in your brain. There's autopilot and the things that you default to, and then there is your ability to deliberately choose what you are going to think about. And when you start to realize and embrace the fact that being a deliberate thinker is a skill, and it is one that I want you to master, and it's one that I want you to practice. Doing a mindset reset, it's not an event, it's a process. Because the negative and limiting beliefs that you have that are already set to your default, those are encoded in the default network in your brain. And so it's going to be a process that you need to repeat. You know you want to make changes, you got a lot you want to do in your life, but then you start thinking about those changes and you immediately start catastrophizing. You start worrying, you start thinking about all the reasons why it's not going to happen. This is so common, and the reason why it's common is because somebody in your past either trained you to think this way, or you've had so many bad things happen that you've trained yourself to assume and predict that bad things are always going to happen to you. There will be bad things that happen. There will. It's a fact of life. But if you are constantly allowing your mind to default to thinking that bad things will happen, or thinking that you're out of shape, or thinking that you're a loser, or thinking that you're not worthy, or thinking that things aren't going to turn out, it becomes your default mode of thinking. Your default mode of thinking, scientists call it the default mode network. The default mode network is a series of neurons in your brain that has automated certain things. The reason why we have a default mode network is because we need it. There's so many things that you and I have to do every single day that shouldn't require us to do a lot of thinking. The problem is thinking patterns become part of your default mode network. Your default mode is to say, I'm an imposter, I'm a loser, I'm not likable, nobody likes me, I'm not lovable. It has become part of your default mode network. And it's super important for you to realize that just like I could go from being a right-hander and teach myself how to be a left-hander, it is the exact same process for you to go from somebody who defaults to thinking negative garbage to becoming somebody who thinks directly. And just like learning to go from writing with your right hand to teaching yourself to write with your left hand, it is going to be a process, not an event. It is going to require you to switch out of the mode where you automatically grab the pen with your right hand and you direct your thoughts to deliberately grab this pen with your left hand. In the beginning, your handwriting is going to blow. You're not going to be able to read it very well. It's not going to feel familiar. It's going to feel clunky. The same thing is true with when you start to switch your thoughts from the things that you default to being very direct and deliberate, to thinking things that are positive, that are supportive, that are optimistic, that are full of possibility. This is the work of changing the patterns in your mind. There's no other way to do it. And you can do it. Just like you could teach yourself to go from defaulting from being a lefty to being direct and concentrating and teaching yourself to write with your right hand. You can do it. It's going to require you to move from default or autopilot into a direct way of thinking. Autopilot's great when it's helpful. It's horrendous for you when it is working against you. the number one thing that is going to stop you is the way that you think. Because if you can change how you think, you will, in fact, change your life. I believe the way that you think is a choice. I believe that you are either going to repeat the thinking patterns that you've always had this year, or you can evolve them. Because when you change how you think, you will change your life. We are trying to teach you how to become a more deliberate thinker. Think this, not that. What is your limiting belief? What is the thing that you think about yourself? Maybe your parents or your mother or your father taught you to think that way about yourself. Maybe you went through a horrible breakup and that person made you feel unworthy. Maybe you've had a bunch of setbacks in your life and that's what gave you that limiting belief. But what is your limiting belief? Now that you've identified your limiting belief, we're going to look at what is it costing you to choose to repeat it. Write down your limiting belief. I see a lot of, I'm not good enough. My mental health is holding me back. I can't run a successful business. I'm lazy and I can't do anything. I'm not healthy enough. Money is the issue. I'm scared to fail. What is the limiting belief that you have? Once you've written that down, you're afraid of failure, you don't deserve success, all that kind of stuff. I don't know how to start. These are excellent. You're doing an excellent job. The first step to moving from that default into getting deliberate is actually seeing it. So seeing it is fantastic because now we can start to understand that, whoa, this got programmed in. It's my default mode. I want to get rid of it. Here's what you're going to do in order to identify the cost, okay? You're going to ask yourself 3 questions, and they're very simple. What is this limiting belief in my case that I'm not a good person? What does it cost me in my past to think this way? What is it costing me in this present moment to think that I'm not a good person? And here's the kicker. If I don't evolve this, if I don't get deliberate, what is it going to cost me in the future to continue to think that I'm not a good person? You can't get rid of the default until you actually spot it. And now that you've seen it, I want you to realize for the rest of your life, you have a job. And your job is to make sure that when that default network kicks back up and you start to murmur that you're too old, you're not smart enough, you're not good enough, that is a moment where you have got to do a mindset reset. This isn't the voice of God talking to me. This is some programming that's set on default. I don't have to live my life and I don't have to have a future where I constantly say things that are negative to myself. This is the most miraculous thing that I've ever heard. But the point is that if you don't get deliberate, you will be stuck with the default mode of thinking. And the way that you reprogram your default mode of thinking so that the default becomes positive and the default becomes courageous and the default becomes loving is first you catch the negative default, and second, you direct it to something deliberate. So instead of thinking, no one likes me, this is mine because I think I'm a bad person. No one likes me. What I want you to think instead is the right people love me. That's pretty powerful. If you're somebody who says, I'm too old, here's what I want you to say, I have plenty of time. Or you could say, I have so much experience, I'm definitely going to succeed. If you say, I'm too young, then say anything you want, from I have plenty of time to learn what I need to learn, to being young is an advantage, to whatever it is. The point that I'm trying to make is, if your default is negative, I don't want you to think that. I want you to catch it when you do, and then I want you to think this, something positive.